Hello and welcome, or welcome again to Masterclasses Online. In this course, we'll be diving again into the world of microcement, but this time we'll be exploring various techniques and finishes to create textures. But before we begin, let's first discuss what we mean by textures. So, in the context of microcement and more generally architectural finishes, texture refers to the surface quality or feel of a material. This includes its visual appearance, of course, tactile sensation, and overall character. Textures can be categorized in various ways, such as roughness or smoothness, patterns and designs, depths and dimension, which can be enhanced by colors and tones. Some textures occur naturally, and we are very familiar with the grain of wood or the ruggedness of stone, for example. But other textures can be created intentionally, this time using various techniques and tools. Now, when it comes to creating textures with microcement, there's a world of creativity and freedom at your fingertips. There's no right or wrong way to achieve a specific finish, as the beauty of textures is subjective. This means that you have the opportunity to experiment, explore, and develop your own unique style and techniques. However, it's important to note that even though beauty is subjective, there is still a thin gap between something looking good, pleasing to the eye, and something messy that looks unfinished or not balanced. So even if creativity is not limited, there are some rules and techniques that will make the difference between falling on one side or the other of this thin gap. So in this course, we'll be focusing on a wide range of microcement finishes, from rough and rustic to finer ones with finishes like mineral, striated, dragged, travertine, and multitonal in layers. For those interested in obtaining smooth and flat finishes instead, we have covered that extensively in our online course called the Wet on Wet technique, so we won't speak of that in this video. So, in this course, we will cover different topics, such as surface preparation, the material and tools needed, the mixing, the different application techniques, of course, and finally, the protective options for your work. By the end of this course, you should have a solid understanding of the endless possibilities that microcement textures offer, and you should have the knowledge to create bespoke finishes tailored to your own projects or clients' needs, while maintaining a balance between creativity, aesthetics, and durability. So let's get started on this exciting journey into the world of microcement textures. In this course, as the title suggests, we will be obviously working with microcement. However, the different finishes that I will show you can be obtained with other compounds like fillers, polished plaster, and more, and you should try it. But then the process of application, the drying time, the hardness, and the end result could vary a lot depending on the material used. Concerning microcement, it has very specific properties which makes it very adapted to create textures with, as you can apply it either thin or thick with minimal risks of cracks. During the drying process and when it turns like a dough, you will see that it holds itself very well, so you can stamp, drag, scrape it without any problem. And once dry, it is very hard, so you can then sand it very safely, burnish, and even polish it. As well, it sticks to almost any surfaces, providing that they are well prepared, which makes microcement very versatile. You can virtually use it everywhere, on walls, floors, furniture, tables, and worktops. So, in this course, we will work with a microcement that we distribute, but the techniques that I will show you are not brand specific, so you don't need to buy this microcement to achieve these finishes. Anyway, it's not at all the purpose of this course. The purpose of this course is to show techniques that will work with most brands. Now, from brand to brand, the microcement will have different behaviors, like the drying time, the hardness, the flexibility. But the techniques shown will allow you to obtain similar results, whatever products you are using. The only products which can behave very differently are the epoxy-based microcement, as they can be sometimes tacky or sticky, which could then make it very difficult to obtain certain effects. So here we will work with regular microcement in two parts. The powder containing the cement with some special adjuvants, and the pigments, at least for our brand, because the colors are premixed, when yours could have a bottle of liquid colorant to add with your powder. And then we have the acrylic resin, simply to add to the powder. Okay, so now that we spoke about the microcement, let's see what tools we need. Okay, so here we have a selection of most of the tools that we will be using during this online course, starting with the mixing of the microcement. By the way, always use a power tool rather than mixing by hand, unless it is a very, very small quantity, to avoid lumps in your mix. So here, because I'm not dealing with large quantities for this online course, I will simply use a screwdriver on which I will attach a normal mixing paddle. Of course, if I had to mix larger quantities, I will have used instead a regular mixer. Now, the application tools. So you can use trowels, normal trowels. So this one is a little stiffer. We have here something more flexible. So you can use them for the first coat, sometimes the second coat of your microcement, but mainly, and I prefer to use spatulas. Just because we will have to deal with a lot of changes of angles, and it's just then more intuitive and more gentle for your wrist, and you will just have a better result and quicker in general for creating textures with a spatula. It doesn't need to be this particular one. Another spatula will work as well. Also, it's very easy to find different sizes of spatulas, like this one, which are smaller and very handy if you want to do a more precise job. Now, the texturing tools. We will use this type of sponge, absolutely normal, a synthetic one, which comes handy when you have to remove some of the wrinkles or overlaps of the previous coats of microcement, and you can also create soft textures with it. But my favorite one is the natural sea sponge, just because when you buy them, they have random shapes with different types of cavities. So that will give you a much more natural look when you stamp it onto the microcement to create some textures. We will also use paper, folded, and plastic bags to stamp onto our microcement. We will also use squeegees. So this squeegee is not the regular one that you will use to clean your floors or windows. It is dedicated for decorative finishes. It is called Planeo, and I will put a description at the end of the course for this tool, as well as the other ones that we're using in this online course. So the good thing with this squeegee is that you can use it like it is, but more interestingly, you can cut and create some different shapes, so concave or convex ones, very good to create different types of lines and grooves when you're doing a dragged effect. Now, to create a straighted effect, we will simply use, to create a bespoke tool, like a fratone, an external doormat. So this one, you can find that on Amazon absolutely everywhere. It looks like an AstroTurf, but little firmer, made of plastic. It's exactly the shape of the original fratone tool that you will buy for quite much. And you will cut it and fix it onto this foam trowel. The good thing is that you can buy very big trowels, and with a mat like that, we can do a lot in one go. So very interesting. Now the sanding tools. I'm working with Mirka sanders, but you can use Festool. They are very good as well, very similar. We have here a very good dust extraction. They are light, strong, powerful, reliable. So I would really recommend you to have something like that, or the Festool one. If you're on a budget, you can, of course, buy something cheaper. But if you are planning to do a lot of microcement, really worth investing in something of this quality. Regarding the sanding discs, so here is a Mirka mesh, very good for the dust extraction, so we will use them a lot here. I like to use an interface, so soft backing plate like that, and that is because then we will have something very flexible to follow our texture rather than cutting it. So very important to have some soft backing pads behind. Also, we will use diamond discs like this one, 60 grit, 8 holes as well. Very good for dust extraction, 120, 200. So the diamond discs are very tough, very resistant. They will last for longer than conventional sanding discs, but they will cut more. So we might use more of the normal discs for textures because we don't necessarily want to cut the texture and ruin it, but we want to enhance it by burnishing it to bring up some contrast. So conventional discs will be perfect for that. If you want to know more about the diamond discs and how to sand microcement with diamond tools, I have an entire topic dedicated for that in the previous online course called the wet on wet technique. It is free to access it. You don't need to be enrolled to watch it. So I would really recommend you to have a view at it. It's very informative and you will learn a lot. Anyway, I think we did a good tour of the tools that we will be using. Let's move on now to the next topic. All right, we will now cover something super important, I could even say essential, which is the preparation of the background on which you will work. So before you start anything, the first thing to do, it might sound obvious, is to assess your substrate. It is absolutely crucial. Think of it as the foundation of a house. You will not build a house on a shaky one, will you? So the same goes for our microcement application. The substrate, in fact, is our foundation and we need it to be as solid as possible. So the very first step is to ensure our surface is crack-free. It's as simple as this. Small cracks can lead to big issues in your finish and need to be addressed. Next, we need to look out for any areas that might be at risk of cracking. This could be due to a number of reasons. Maybe the substrate is uneven or it's made of different materials. So it's crucial to have an even and homogeneous surface. This helps to prevent any future cracks or damages, and we will speak of that in detail in the next videos. But before we do, it is also worth mentioning a few more points. An even substrate is not only essential for a smooth application, but is also a matter of economy. Microcement isn't cheap, so we definitely don't want to waste it by using more than necessary just to even out an irregular surface. Also, if our substrate isn't flat, we'll end up with thin areas of microcement at the high points and thick patches at the lower points. This unevenness leads to inconsistent drying times. Areas with thin layers will dry quicker, while thicker sections will take longer to dry. This discrepancy can make our job tricky, especially when it comes to the dragging technique, for example. If some areas are still too soft while others are ready for being dragged, we'll end up with a patchy and consistent finish. Another thing to mention, if you have high points with less microcement, you might have issues when sanding these high points at the end, as you could end up exposing the underlying material. So, in summary, let's always remember the golden rule. A well-assessed, flat, even, and crack-free substrate is our stepping stone to a successful microcement application. So here we have some of the products that we will be using to ensure a good preparation. Commencing with the epoxy filler. So here we have one in two parts. Once mixed, it becomes incredibly hard. This one actually is a very thin paste, not runny, so you can apply it on horizontal and also on vertical surfaces. I use it for almost everything to repair cracks, fill holes, and joints. Then we have fiberglass meshes. So here is a piece of a large roll, and obviously here we have a small roll. You might not always need a mesh, especially if you are using epoxy, but if there is a junction between different materials, a structural crack, or anything that worries you, then epoxy and meshes will make your surface absolutely secure. Now, to even the substrate, there are many different compounds out there, but I really like the Eco Mortar from Saint-Astier. It is a lime-based product, but full of resin, and the R100 reference, this one, will stick on absolutely everything. A very, very good product. Then we have here a sealer to lower the suction of the substrate, which is a must, especially in between the coats of microcement. And finally, we have here the primer. The primer will ensure a good bonding of the microcement, make your surface homogeneous to avoid ghosting, and it will give you more working time. So you will see here and understand why all these products and the process can give a different result depending on what product you are using and how you apply it. All right, let's dive into one of the most vital aspects of microcement work. It's protection, and that is because our finishes are only as good as their durability. So first things first, and before we start speaking all the different options that we have here, choosing the right type of protection depends heavily on where our work is going to live. Is it a feature wall in a lounge, a surface in a bathroom, an outdoor piece, or maybe a dining table or even a worktop? Then the choice of protection will vary based on these factors, and here's why. For areas that aren't exposed to a lot of moisture or wear, like a feature wall in a lounge, for example, a simple water-based penetrating sealer, like this one, or the clear coat here, could be enough to keep your work looking fresh and protected. However, for areas that see a lot of moisture, like bathrooms, we'll need definitely something stronger. A high performance sealant like this one will be our best bet there. Same goes for pieces like dining tables or worktops. We need a strong sealant with a very high abrasive resistance, like the solvent-based that we have here, that can withstand frequent cleaning and resist to stains. And finally, when we are talking about external work, we need to consider elements like rain, snow, and sun exposure, of course. So for these situations, we may need to use a UV resistant or weather resistant sealer, like the Sika one here, or the Lithofin, both being breathable. You have other brands, of course. But ultimately, it's about choosing the right protection for the right purpose. It's an essential step to make our work last longer and continue to look its best. But here's another interesting point. Our choice of protection is not just about durability. It also plays a significant part in the visual outcome of our work too. So let's discuss how different types of protection affect the aesthetic and functionality of our microcement creations. So for those looking to maintain the natural finish of microcement, you might opt for an invisible penetrating sealer, like we mentioned before. This type of protection will keep, you can see here, the raw and authentic look of microcement. Here we have a solvent-based one. In fact, it looks here like we didn't put anything to protect it. But let's say we want to add a bit of sheen, a little bit of that polished look. We could then use waxes. Wax gives a lovely natural look to our microcement and enhances its texture. We can find waxes in different forms, liquid, semi-liquid, in paste, in spray. But even though they can look different, we have two types of waxes, water-based or solvent-based ones. The solvent-based ones will generally offer a better protection and can be polished to a very high level of shine. But the water-based ones can generally look more natural, like this one, with just a subtle sheen. And they are not as smelly as solvent-based ones, which often contains turpentine or other spirits. So it's a good point too. Note that if you want to use a solvent-based wax on microcement, it is recommended to apply a first coat of water-based one to make your microcement less porous to ease the application of the solvent wax. But in any case, remember, as the wax provides a gorgeous finish, it is not the most durable option and it will require some maintenance. Now, stepping up the protection game, we have here topical sealants. Topical means that the sealant is not penetrating the microcement, but it is staying on top of it like a protective sheet. They offer superior protection against stains and abrasion while providing very good waterproofing capabilities. However, because they are topical, having this kind of a sheet on top of the microcement that might not appeal to those looking for a more natural finish. And that is even more true with a glossy water-based sealant, solvent-based sealant, which will then look plasticky. Now, in the family of topical sealants, we also have water-based ones and solvent-based ones. You can see even here the difference of color. Water-based sealants are very easy to apply, and in general they retain a more natural look, while solvent-based sealants offer superior resistance against liquids and abrasion, making them an excellent choice for high wear areas. The main downfall with solvent sealants is that they release solvent particles, which are of course harmful, so you will need to wear a respirator and even have other people on site simply away during the application. Also, the application of a solvent sealant can also be more tedious, and you will have to be extra careful not leaving roller marks. Now, finally, to protect external works, my preference is to use breathable sealers, which will allow the moisture to escape. As for topical sealants, in the family of breathable sealers, we also have water-based and solvent-based sealers. The water-based are invisible, whereas you can see that the solvent-based will give this kind of a wet look with generally a satin sheen. Note that there are new external sealers which are acrylic based. I have not found myself a very good acrylic one, but if you were more lucky, don't hesitate to leave a comment here below. Anyway, to summarize, choosing the right type of protection is a balancing act. You need to weigh up the level of protection you need against the aesthetic outcome you want. Remember, our work is not just about looking great, it is also about making it long-lasting. Okay, so for you to visualize better the impact that the protection can have on your microcement, the look of your microcement, I made a board here with different types of protection applied onto a stone effect. So here we have actually the stone effect microcement bare like it is, so it is a reference point. We can see it under the masking tapes as well. So on the first row here we have the water-based and solvent-based penetrating sealers. So it is not topical, it will really penetrate the microcement. Here we have the waxes and the topical sealants, which stays on top of the microcement. So here we can see that the water-based sealer doesn't change so much the look of the microcement, whereas the solvent-based one, the Sikagard, will give something darker, more of a wet look with a satin sheen, which is actually nice. It's a very good product. Speaking of the waxes, the water-based, again, will stay pretty light. We have a tiny difference between this one and the bare one here. Here we have a coat of water-based and on top a solvent-based wax, which penetrated it a little, hence the darker tone here, but still a little lighter than two coats of solvent waxes directly onto the microcement. Concerning the topical sealants, again, the water-based one is the one that will keep the look of the microcement the most, whereas the solvent-based on top of the pre-sealer will still stay pretty light, slightly darker than the water-based one, but nothing compares to the solvent directly applied onto the microcement without a penetrating, a pre-sealer. So the pre-sealer really for the topical sealants is to keep the color staying quite light. Anyway, I hope that it could help you to visualize and to understand plainly that the choice of your protection will have a massive impact on the look of your microcement. Before we start working with microcement, it's important that we take the time to speak about the precautions to keep ourselves safe. So, microcement, as it contains cement of course, can be quite irritating and corrosive, and it's not something we want on our skin or in our eyes. So the first thing we need to do is to make sure we are wearing the right personal protective equipment, or PPE for short. This includes gloves to protect our hands and safety goggles to shield our eyes. For the gloves, I will really recommend you nitrile ones because they are very tough and very resistant. For the goggles, this can be a must to protect your eyes if you are working on a ceiling, for example. In any case, just make sure that you have read the safety sheets of your supplier and the first measures to take in case you have a splash in your eyes, or simply if you are scratching your eyes with microcement on your finger, which happened to me a few times. Then we've got the issue of dust. When we are mixing microcement, especially large quantities, it can create some dust that we definitely don't want to be breathing in. So a dust mask like this one or a respirator is a must-have in some situations. Also, if you are using solvent-based sealants, these will release vapors that are not good at all for our lungs. So a respirator like this one is then really a must. Anyway, some sealants are so aggressive that you will not be able to stand up more than 2 minutes without a respirator like this one. And remember, not all respirators have the same level of protection, so make sure that you are using the one which is designed for the type of work that you are doing. Last but not least, let's talk about waste management. Yes, we can clean up most microcement with water, but that doesn't mean we can just wash it down any drain. The leftover microcement can solidify and block the pipes, but more importantly, it can also cause harm to our environment. So always make sure to dispose of your waste in appropriate places according to the manufacturer guidance. In summary, it's just common sense. Just make sure you're protected and follow the right disposal method. Remember that it's not just about creating beautiful work with microcement, it's also about doing it safely and responsibly. You might already be using microcement or maybe watched our online course about the wet-on-wet technique, so obviously this section is more for people new to microcement, for having an idea of the mixing process, which is anyway very straightforward because in any case there is nothing else to do than simply following your supplier's guidance, knowing that there could be a difference depending on the brand in the ratio between the powder and the resin. So with the microcement that I am using, it is a ratio in weight of 4 parts of powder for 1 part of resin. I would recommend to start with the resin first, then incorporate the powder, and that is for avoiding dry bits or lumps at the bottom of your bucket, knowing that for very small quantities it matters less as you can reach the bottom very easily. With the microcement that I am using, the cement being premixed with pigments, I don't have to worry about the color, and I only have to add the resin with the colored powder. But for many other brands, the colorant will be separated from the powder in a liquid form instead. So you will have to add it to the resin before making your mix with the powder. Mix at a medium speed, and once done, let it to rest for a couple of minutes. Note that in case you are working on vertical surface, this time you can let your mix to firm up for a little more time to have the mortar less liquid or less runny. This will ease the application and avoid having the microcement falling on the floor. Let's speak now about the general or usual process of application when you want to create textures. So most of the time the application will be done with a minimum of 2 layers, wet on dry, which means that the second layer is applied after the first one has completely dried. There are some exceptions, of course, and for some finishes you will want to apply some coats wet on wet, but that is more for smoothing the top layer as you go. We will actually speak of that later on in the chapter concerning the multi-layer finishes. Anyway, the idea of applying wet on dry is because you will mostly work on the top coat to create the texture. You could then think that you will only need 1 coat and not a minimum of 2. So why do we need to have a minimum of 2 coats? And why do we want to have the first coat hard and dry before applying the second one? The reasons for that are multiple, but the main one is to avoid having the substrate showing up if you have some misses during the application, or if you drag or scratch the top layer too soon, which could then reveal the substrate underneath. So in short, the base coat is not only here for making your work safe, it is also the lower layer that you may want to reveal intentionally. Once your textured coat is dry, unless you want to add more coats, of course, you can now sand the surface, polish it if you want to, and protect it. You have plenty of different options depending on the result you are after, and that is precisely what we will now see by creating our first finishes.